32, fullback for the Cleveland Browns. His face and number have become all too familiar to the opposing teams of the National Football League. The Baltimore Colts remember him well. A Sunday afternoon in November 1959, for instance, when he scored 3 touchdowns and led the Browns to a 38-31 victory. This is number 24, former shortstop for the Pittsburgh Pirates. His competitive spirit and athletic ability are well known to the opposing teams of the National League. On a Friday the 13th in 1960, number 24 went 6 for 6 to lead his team to victory and eventually to the National League pennant. The 9th annual All-Star basketball game played in Detroit, Michigan. Its All-Star lineup included the best players from the East and West. This is number 23 of the West team. His sparkling play helped the West to an upset victory. This superbly conditioned athlete will always be remembered for his consummate skill as a champion diver. Flawless performances such as this brought him many international honors, including 2 gold medals won during Olympic Games competition. This young athlete was the pole vaulting sensation of the 1961 indoor track season. His determination and potential greatness augur well for this country in future athletic competition. Many of the athletes you have just seen, and many more that you are about to see, have something in common. They all have been or are part of another great team, the United States Army. They are but a small part of the Army's All-Americans, the subject of this big picture. Hello, I'm Chris Schenkel. It's been my privilege and good fortune to spend many years in the exciting world of sports. I've come to know and respect these athletes who have given so much to making this country of ours so sports-minded. During this big picture, you're going to see and meet some of these athletes. Our attention, however, will be directed to more than just their athletic contributions. For just as you and I have had occasion to serve our country, so have many of our best-known athletes, and they have served with pride and distinction. Our story of the Army's All-Americans might well start with the ominous months before Pearl Harbor, when an uneasy world stood poised for global conflict. It was May 1941 when this man, Hank Greenberg, a home run hitting first baseman of the Detroit Tigers, decided the time had come to forget baseball for a while and enlist in the United States Army. This was Hank's last game that year. His booming bat would be sorely missed by the Detroit Tigers. After that game, Hank said his goodbyes to the press, Tiger manager Del Baker, and the Tiger fans. Tomorrow he would be Private Hank Greenberg, United States Army. His induction ceremony made it official. While the uniform was of a different cut, Hank Greenberg was now a member of another team, much larger, but still a team. By the time America faced the ugly reality of war, the athletic world had begun to send countless athletes into all the services. There were other athletes who responded to the war effort in a different way. At Yankee Stadium, many baseball greats participated in a war relief baseball game. The huge crowd enjoyed every minute, including servicemen, among whom were Hank Greenberg and a former professional boxer named Barney Ross. Then, with baseball immortal Babe Ruth at bat and the legendary Walter Johnson on the mound, the business of war was happily shoved aside for a brief moment. Another athlete who donned an Army uniform was heavyweight champion Joe Louis, who as a sergeant here, toured the European theater of operations during World War II. Our Army, realizing that organized athletics were just as important during war, sent Joe to troop units where he showed our soldiers just why he was the world champion. And whether Joe was sparring, refereeing, or just talking with the troops, American soldiers loved it. To them, he was still the Joe Louis who symbolized the sport of professional boxing. Professional baseball's contribution of athletes to the Army provided our servicemen opportunities to watch service games that included some familiar faces. Joe DiMaggio, Jerry Pretty, and Mike McCormick were among those in the lineup of this 1944 contest between teams from Fort Shafter and the 7th Army Air Force. Competition was pretty tough in this league. Even the mighty Yankee Clipper found the opposing pitchers tough to hit. After the end of World War II, our nation was busy returning to peaceful pursuits and anxious to forget the memories resulting from 3.5 years of bitter war. But world peace was again shattered in the summer of 1950. And Americans faced a new threat in a place called Korea. Once again, American soldiers were needed, and so too athletes found themselves in the familiar efforts of making whatever contributions they were asked to make. The United States Army had learned during World War II that the American soldier took his interest in sports with him. Among the great boosters to his morale were the personal tours such as this one. It was November 1950. The place? Korea. The arrival of Joe DiMaggio and Lefty O'Doul provided a welcome relief to American soldiers who were a long way from home. The familiar welcome signs of World War II now greeted a new era of athletes, wearing both an Army and a baseball uniform. Major leaguers Danny O'Connell, Johnny Antonelli, and Sam Calderon were now teammates of the Fort Myer Colonials. While the Colonials never made it to the World Series, the team was an accurate reflection of the Army's efforts to keep organized athletics an important part of military life. Wherever our soldiers were stationed, the Army operated sports clinics and obtained the professional talents of sports figures such as Cookie Lavagetto. Fundamentals of the game were emphasized to increase individual physical skill. And when the teacher is someone like Chuck Dressen, you know that the level of instruction is the best. This baseball clinic at Camp Stoneham brought together two of the game's finest strategists and spokesmen, Dressen and Lavagetto. Among the many young men entering the United States Army during the Korean War was an athlete who would have been quite at home at any sports clinic. His name, Dick Groat. Prior to entering the Army, Dick had distinguished himself at Duke University, gaining All-American honors in both baseball and basketball. Wearing number 6 in this Duke-NYU game, he went on to set a national collegiate basketball scoring record of 831 points during his junior year. After serving in the Army, Dick Groat returned to baseball. In 1960, the Pittsburgh Pirates won the National League pennant, and Dick Groat spearheaded that successful effort. His hustle, team spirit, and sparkling play made him that year's most valuable player in the National League. And in the classic 1960 World Series, Dick Groat helped the Pirates become the world champions when they defeated the New York Yankees in 7 games. Climaxed by Bill Mazeroski's heroic 9th inning home run. Now let's go to Forbes Field in Pittsburgh to meet this former soldier and former shortstop for the Pittsburgh Pirates.
The Army sports program, whether it be baseball, basketball, football, track, or any of the others, is established with the idea of contributing to the physical fitness of the soldier, both for the good of the Army and for the individual as well. Parents of young men in uniform need not worry that their sons will be exposed to substandard athletic programs or equipment. Wherever Army personnel are stationed, the athletic program available is organized, supervised, and carried out by military and civilian personnel who ensure that the program is varied, organized, and maintained in a safe and thorough manner. At a time when our nation is being urged to rediscover physical fitness and work at it, I am happy to add my voice to the others in this film and say that physical fitness is not only for professional athletes, but for everyone. The United States Army has always underlined physical conditioning, as I well remember. But we can all, athletes and non-athletes as well, do our part to prevent this country of ours from becoming soft of mind and body.
Dick Groat is only one of the many athletes from the world of sports who has worn the uniform of the United States Army. From World War II through Korea, and into the Berlin crisis of 1961, Army rosters have included the following names: Joe DiMaggio, Ralph Houck, Whitey Ford, Willie Mays, Ron Hansen, Tony Kubek, and many others from professional baseball. From the National and American Football Leagues, Paul Hornung and Larry Grantham, to name just a few. From professional basketball, Elgin Baylor, who you saw earlier in this show. Amateur track and field athletes included Bill Nieder, Ira Murchison, and Don Bragg. And national and Olympic diving champion, a former major in the United States Army, Sammy Lee. The Berlin crisis of 1961 created a difficult adjustment for many of the reservists recalled to active duty. Tony Kubek, shortstop for the New York Yankees, who found himself back in the service at Fort Lewis, Washington, had this to say during a TV interview.
Tony, how do you feel about being back in the Army? Well, I think I feel the same way as everyone else, Hugh. Naturally, nobody's happy to leave their families and their jobs. However, we, as President Kennedy says, we have a job to do.
Another athlete who has been given a job to do is this young man, Specialist 4, Henry Wadsworth, now serving in the United States Army. His primary athletic interest is pole vaulting, and prior to entering the Army, track enthusiasts watched him as he gained national prominence in this event. In February 1961, at the Philadelphia Games, the pole vault event was one of the highlights of the evening. Don Bragg, then of the Army, was the vaulter to watch. This Olympic gold medal winner took first place in the event. Henry Wadsworth placed third. Henry entered the United States Army after a sensational 1961 season, during which he finished second in the indoor championships and third in the outdoor championships. Henry has found that the Army places great emphasis on physical conditioning. This established part of Army training serves not only the individual, but the overall mission of the Army as well. And whenever time permits, Specialist 4, Henry Wadsworth, sheds his Army uniform for a tracksuit to practice his specialty, the pole vault.
When I entered the Army in 1961, I didn't realize how much the Army did to promote competitive sports and encourage individual participation in organized athletics. One of the important advantages of athletics is learning to work with and compete against other athletes. For instance, every year the U.S. Army lends its support and permits athletes in uniform to participate and compete in athletic contests in the United States and other countries as well. These events include the Olympic Games, Pan American Games, the Modern Pentathlon meets, the International Military Sports Council meets in Europe, and various amateur athletic union competition in this country. And when these athletes who are wearing a U.S. Army uniform do compete, it is without conflict to their military duties and at no expense to the Army. This doesn't mean that the Army gives athletes special handling, but the Army does recognize that through competitive sports and international competition, much goodwill and sportsmanship are gained. The world of sports has an international language of its own, and I know how much goodwill and mutual understanding there can be when athletes of many nations meet in a common field to test their athletic skills and physical endurance.
The Wadsworth story has been repeated many times in the past. At the Los Angeles Coliseum, site of the 1956 Olympic trials, 35,000 people looked on as the 100-meter finals turned into a spirited duel between Bobby Morrow of Abilene Christian and Ira Murchison of the United States Army. Bobby Morrow first, Ira Murchison second. In the finals of the quarter-mile relay, Lou Jones of the Army set a record of 45 2/10 seconds to break the tape as the winner. The 800-meter or half-mile finals, two Army representatives, Arnie Sewell and Tom Courtney, thrilled the large crowd to its feet. Army star Tom Courtney set a new United States record of 1 minute 46 4/10 seconds to win it, with Arnie Sewell finishing second. In the 1956 Olympics, American athletes continued to do well. In the hammer throw, Lieutenant Al Hall, Army, made a strong bid for a gold medal. But it was Hal Conley, also an Army representative, who won the gold medal with a mighty heave of 207 feet, 2 3/4 inches. In the shot put, it was a duel between the United States Air Force and the Army. Harry O'Brien of the Air Force won the event with a distance of 60 feet, 11 inches. Bill Nieder of the Army finished second. The Olympic basketball finals between the United States and the Soviet Union. The American team, eager to show the Soviet squad how basketball should be played, led 56-27 at the half. The second half provided more of the same as the Americans stymied the Russian athletes, winning with ease. Final score, 89-55. Gold medals for the victorious American squad, 7 of whom were United States servicemen. At the Aau Diving Championships in Detroit, Michigan, another Army representative maintained this continuing image of physical excellence. Gary Tubayan in a dazzling forward 1.5. To clinch the diving championship, it was Gary in a back 2.5 layout. Another Army's All-American, Gary Tubayan. From baseball, track, the Olympics, and diving events, we've seen outstanding athletic displays of physical proficiency. There's another member of the Army's All-Americans we want you to meet. A former lieutenant in the United States Army Infantry, who today is the spectacular fullback for the Cleveland Browns, Jimmy Brown. Since joining the Cleveland Browns, this All-American from Syracuse University has become a one-man wrecking crew. Here against the Cardinals, Jimmy, wearing number 32, explodes for 2 of his 4 touchdown runs as the Browns won the game, 38-24. At Municipal Stadium in Cleveland, where football fans have long cheered some of the great names in pro football, the stands still echo to the thundering cheers that followed Jimmy Brown across the opponent's goal line.
As fullback for the Cleveland Browns, I often think that heading into our opponent's defensive line or backfield might not be too different from leading an infantry squad into enemy territory. As a former lieutenant, U.S. Army Infantry, I know that when certain ground has to be gained, it's the infantry soldier who has to move out and take it. In football, when yardage is needed for a first down or that big touchdown, the backfield depends on that line up front to open the way to pay dirt. That's just one of the ways that football and soldiering are kind of similar. Then there's also physical endurance, combined effort where knowing what to do and when to do it is mighty important, and being able to follow commands with good timing and coordination. A good athlete and a good soldier know and accept these things because they both know the importance of leadership, training, and learning the job down to the last detail. Athletics, whether it's touch football around the neighborhood, organized sports in school or community, or playing pro football for the Cleveland Browns, is essentially team effort and competitive spirit. And these points are equally important to a really big team like the U.S. Army. You have seen a lot of exciting moments in sports during this show. We Americans have always taken our sports seriously. But there's one thing we should all remember. Watching baseball, football, or basketball is great and certainly part of our national life. But just watching these games isn't enough to keep any of us active and in condition, especially our youngsters. Our president wants us to become aware of our physical condition and to actively engage however we can in some type of daily physical exercise. Athletes know how important daily exercise is. The U.S. Army has always been aware of the importance of organized athletics as a means of contributing to its overall mission. If we all do our part by using some of those muscles that just never get used, we Americans can become participants as well as spectators. And that way we can make sure that we have a nationwide team that would really qualify as All-Americans.
A nationwide team of All-Americans, a goal that each of us can try to achieve. What we have been watching is the unique contribution of athletes, many of whom have worn the Army uniform and who have achieved that goal in large measure while serving their country. It is most important that we correlate the connection between the physical demands of the athlete and today's soldier. Because in the service, when the chips are down, physical conditioning and training are what pay off. Swimming in competitive meets has its counterpart in the military. For the athlete and the soldier, it's their training and physical endurance that accomplish the job. The pole vaulter relies on the same muscular and reflex coordination as the soldier who finds himself rappelling in mountainous terrain. A pitcher, a discus thrower, or a shot putter call on physical skills, as does the soldier who needs to use a hand grenade to carry out his mission. cross-country runner depends on endurance and physical capacity to the same degree as these rangers engaged in a military exercise. And professional athletes at spring training camps acquire stamina and confidence, just as these basic trainees do when they go through calisthenics, which are a standard and continuing part of Army training. What we have been seeing during the last 30 minutes is merely a glimpse of an Army image that most people do not think about. From baseball diamonds to cinder tracks to basketball courts and football fields, we met a few of its current greats, along with some nostalgic moments of former greats. This show has been devoted to these athletes of yesterday and today, men who have served their sport and their country with honor and distinction. They are a part of what we like to call the Army's All-Americans.